The battlefield was silent now. Ships had burned, soldiers had fallen, and the war cries of both sides had faded into nothing but smoke. Among the ruins, a single human soldier had been taken alive. His armor was broken, his face marked with ash and blood, but his eyes still held a strange calm. The aliens, proud and victorious, dragged him into their warship. They locked him inside a cold metal cell. The walls were sharp and gray, the air heavy and dry. They expected fear. They expected the human to shout, to beg, to cry for mercy. That was how most prisoners behaved. But this one was different. The human sat down in silence. His head bowed slightly, his hands resting calmly on his knees. He did not resist, but he did not surrender either. His silence was heavier than any chains. At first, the aliens laughed. "Look at him," one guard said. "He thinks staying quiet will scare us." "Maybe he is in shock," another answered. Humans break so easily, but hours passed. Then a day, then another, and the human remained silent. No screams. No begging, not even a word. He ate the food they gave him, drank the water, but never spoke. The guards began to whisper among themselves. "Why doesn't he speak?" one asked. "Maybe he is planning something," another replied. "Or maybe," a third muttered with unease, "he isn't afraid at all." The whispers spread through the corridors of the alien ship. Scientists came to observe him. Commanders came to question him. Still, he gave them nothing. His silence was like a wall they could not climb. One scientist leaned close to the bars of the cell. "Human, speak," she ordered. "Tell us your secrets. Tell us what you know." The soldier only looked up at her. His eyes were steady, unblinking, almost too calm. Then he lowered his gaze again and said nothing. That silence shook her more than any scream would have. The days dragged on. Some guards grew angry. They tried shouting, threatening, even striking the cell bars with their weapons. But the human did not move. He simply watched like a predator waiting for the right moment. Others grew afraid. They refused to go near the cell at all. They claimed the human's eyes followed them even when he seemed to be resting. "His silence is unnatural," one guard said, refusing to enter the corridor. "He's hiding something," another muttered. Soon stories began to spread through the ship. Some said the human was cursed. Others believed he had powers, silent powers, that could twist fate itself. The commanders grew frustrated. They wanted answers, not fear. On the fourth day, they gathered in the observation chamber. Through the glass wall, they watched the human sit perfectly still, like a shadow carved into the room. "He should have broken by now," one commander hissed. "All species break. Then why hasn't he?" Another asked. "Why does he sit there as if he is the one in control?" The chamber fell silent as the question hung in the air. None of them could answer. Inside the cell, the human finally moved. Slowly, he raised his head. His eyes scanned the room, meeting each pair of alien eyes through the glass. He did not speak. He only looked, and that look was enough to send a chill through even the bravest soldier. Because in that moment, the aliens realized something they did not want to admit. The silence was not weakness. The silence was power. The human was waiting. For what? None of them knew. But they could feel it, like a storm building in the distance. Every passing hour made the silence heavier, thicker, more dangerous. And as the fifth day approached, every alien on that ship carried the same unspoken thought when he finally speaks. What will he say? The fifth day began with quiet tension. The human had still not spoken. His silence filled the ship like a shadow, stretching into every corridor and every mind. The alien guards had started a habit. Even when off duty, they came back to stand near his cell. Not because they wanted to, but because they couldn't stay away. Something about the human pulled at them, like a fire you want to touch, even knowing it will burn. They became the watchers. At first, they told themselves it was duty. They had to monitor the prisoner. They had to keep him under control. But deep down, they knew the truth. They were not watching him. They were watching the silence. One guard, a young recruit, leaned closer to the bars. "Why doesn't he sleep?" he whispered to his partner. The human was sitting as always, back straight, eyes half closed, perfectly still. "He does sleep," the other replied uneasily. "But," It doesn't look like sleep. It looks like he's waiting, the recruit shivered. Waiting for what? The scientists, too, had grown restless. They began setting up machines outside the cell, scanners, sensors, translators. They wanted to measure everything, the rhythm of his heart, the speed of his breath, even the flicker of his eyes. The results confused them. His body is calm, one researcher muttered. Almost too calm. No fear, no stress. He should be breaking down by now. Another shook his head. Maybe humans are stronger than we thought. But that answer did not satisfy them. It did not explain the strange feeling that spread across the ship every time they walked near him. One by one, the watchers noticed something else. Sometimes the human's lips moved, not enough to form real words, but enough to suggest he was whispering to himself. They tried recording it, tried slowing it down, tried enhancing the sound. The machines gave them nothing but static. "What is he saying?" one guard asked, pressing his ear close to the bars. The human's eyes flicked open, sharp, sudden, alive. The guard jumped back, heart pounding. He was watching me the whole time," he stammered. From that moment, fewer guards volunteered for duty near the cell. Some claimed the human's silence was seeping into their dreams. They woke in the night hearing a voice that was not theirs. The commanders dismissed it as weakness. But even they could not deny the truth. The human's silence was not ordinary. It was changing them. That evening, 3 high-ranking officers gathered outside the cell. They stood tall, their armor gleaming, their faces hard. "Human," one officer barked, "you will speak now." The soldier did not move. Another officer slammed his hand against the bars. The sound rang through the corridor. "Answer us! Tell us what you know!" The human lifted his head slowly. His eyes moved across the 3 officers. Calm, measuring, cold. And then he smiled. It was not a wide smile. Not friendly. Just a small curve of the lips, so small, yet so sharp it cut through their courage. The officers stepped back before they realized what they were doing. "This is foolish," one muttered, forcing his voice steady. "It's just a trick." But deep inside, he did not believe his own words. By the 6th day, the watchers had grown into believers. Some believed the human was cursed. Some believed he carried a hidden weapon. Some believed he was speaking to unseen allies. All agreed on one thing. The silence was more dangerous than any weapon they had ever faced. The ship, once filled with confidence, now carried an unspoken fear. Conversations dropped when the human's name was mentioned. Footsteps slowed near his cell. No one wanted to be the one chosen for guard duty. Even the youngest recruits could feel it. It was no longer just a prisoner sitting in a cell. It was something else. Something waiting. And though none of them would admit it out loud, every alien on that ship carried the same thought in the back of their minds. When he finally breaks the silence, "We will not like what we hear." By the 7th day, the silence had become unbearable. The alien ship was filled with whispers, fear, and unease. Soldiers avoided the prisoners' corridor. Scientists argued among themselves, and commanders grew frustrated. They had captured a human, one of the most dangerous species in the galaxy, and yet they had learned nothing. Not a single word. The commanders decided it was time to apply pressure. The interrogation chamber was prepared. Bright lights burned from the ceiling, cold machines lined the walls, and the air smelled of iron and smoke. The human was dragged inside, his chains clinking softly as he walked. Still, he made no sound. The lead interrogator, a tall alien with scarred skin, stepped forward. "You will answer us today," he said firmly. The human sat down, calm, silent. His eyes wandered slowly across the room, taking in every machine, every soldier, every detail. Then he lowered his gaze, waiting. The lights flared brighter. Heat pressed against his skin. "Speak!" the interrogator demanded. "Tell us your strategy. Tell us what your kind is planning." The human did not move. The interrogator slammed his hand against the table. "Do you think your silence will save you? Do you think we will give up?" The human's eyes rose, steady and unblinking. He stared into the alien's face, not with anger, not with fear, but with something worse. Patience. The interrogator's voice shook for the first time. He turned to his assistants. Increase the intensity. The machines roared to life. Waves of sound filled the chamber, designed to break the mind of any prisoner. Sharp flashes of light cut through the air. The temperature shifted from freezing cold to burning heat, but the human sat still. His breathing did not change. His body did not tremble. The assistants exchanged uneasy glances. "Commander," one whispered, "he is not reacting." "Then push harder," the commander barked. Hours passed. The alien officers grew tired, their voices hoarse from shouting questions. "Where are your fleets? What are your codes? Who sent you? What is your mission?" Again and again, the questions were thrown at him. Again and again, silence was his only answer. Finally, one guard lost control. He slammed his weapon against the bars of the chamber and shouted, "Speak, human! Speak!" For the first time, the prisoner moved. Slowly, he tilted his head to the side. His lips curved into that same faint smile he had shown before. Not mocking, not joyful, just a small, sharp reminder that he was in control. The guard stumbled back, his courage gone. That night, the commanders gathered in private. "This is not normal," one said. "No species can resist this level of pressure," another agreed. "Then what is he?" Silence filled the room. None of them had an answer. At last, the lead commander spoke. "If we cannot break him with pain, then perhaps we must break him with fear." And so a new plan was made. The next morning, the human was returned to his cell. The guards watched him closely, waiting for a sign of weakness. But there was none. Instead, something unexpected happened. As the guards passed by, they heard him whispering again. His lips moved faintly, soundless words forming in the air. One guard froze. "Did you hear that?" Another nodded slowly. "Yes, but I could not understand it." The guards leaned closer, and then the human stopped. His eyes snapped open, catching theirs. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the guards stumbled back, fear written across their faces. Word spread quickly. The prisoner had spoken, but no one knew what he had said. Some claimed he was calling to his people. Some believed he was cursing the ship. Others whispered that he was speaking to something unseen. The silence had been terrifying. But now the half-heard whispers were worse. Every alien on the ship felt the same cold truth pressing into their minds. The human was not the one under pressure. They were. The 8th day began in silence, as always. But everyone on the alien ship knew something was different. The guards avoided their posts. The scientists stayed away from the prisoner's cell. Even the commanders spoke in low voices, as if afraid the human might hear them. For a week, they had tried everything: interrogation, pressure, tricks, pain. Still, the human gave them nothing, but last night the watchers had seen his lips move again, a whisper too soft to catch. And now the whole ship buzzed with rumors. What if he finally speaks today? What if his words are worse than his silence? That morning, the commanders decided to make one last attempt. The interrogation chamber was prepared again. Lights burned bright, machines hummed, and the guards took their positions. The human was brought inside, his chains clinking softly as he walked. He looked the same as always, calm, steady, almost patient. The lead commander stepped forward. His voice was sharp, but there was fear behind it. "Human, you will speak today." The soldier sat down without a word. His eyes moved slowly across the room, meeting each face one by one. The silence pressed down like a heavy weight. "Tell us what you know," the commander demanded. "Tell us your plans. Tell us where your fleets are!" Still, the human said nothing. The commander's hand shook. He slammed it against the table. "You will answer me!" The human's eyes rose, calm, cold, endless, and then he leaned forward. The guards froze. The room grew still. For the first time in 8 days, the human spoke. His voice was soft, barely more than a whisper, the kind of voice you lean closer to hear. But the words carried a weight that crushed the air from the room. "You're all dead." Just 4 words. But they fell like a blade. The lights seemed to flicker. The machines hummed louder, almost as if they had heard it too. The aliens stared at him, stunned. "What? What did you say?" one guard stammered. The human repeated the words, this time slower. His whisper slithered through the chamber, chilling every ear that heard it. "You're all dead." No one moved. No one spoke. The commanders exchanged nervous glances. Some tried to laugh to brush it off. Empty words, a bluff. "Nothing more," one muttered, his voice shaking. But their soldiers did not laugh. They stepped back from the human, fear written across their faces, because it did not sound like a threat. It did not sound like anger. It sounded like truth, like prophecy. One of the scientists swallowed hard. "Commander, perhaps we should isolate him. His presence is affecting morale." But the commander was not listening. His eyes were locked on the human, who sat perfectly still again, as if the whisper had cost him nothing. The prisoner leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes. He said no more. His silence returned. Yet the echo of those 4 words lingered. "In every corner of the chamber, you're all dead," the guards whispered among themselves as they dragged him back to his cell. "Did you hear his voice? It was so calm. Too calm. He believes it. He truly believes it." And that was what terrified them most. It was not a scream of defiance. It was not a desperate lie. It was certainty. That night, no one on the ship could rest. Soldiers tossed in their bunks, hearing his whisper in their minds. Scientists stared at their machines, unable to focus. Even the commanders found themselves waking in the dark, sweating, the words echoing in their thoughts. One guard finally broke down. "He cursed us," he said, his voice trembling. "Those words, they were a curse," another nodded. "Or a warning." The third, the youngest, whispered the truth none of them wanted to say aloud. What if it was a promise? The human remained in his cell, silent once more, but the damage was done. 4 words had shattered the courage of an entire ship, and though he had returned to silence, every alien now lived with the same fear, the same question burning in their minds. Was the whisper just a threat, or was it the future? The whisper did not fade. It lived in the minds of every alien who had heard it. "You're all dead." Just 4 words. But they repeated like an echo in the silence of the ship. Guards heard it in their dreams. Scientists heard it while they worked. Even the commanders, who tried to stand tall and strong, felt the weight of those words pressing against them. The human was silent again. He did not speak. He did not move. He only sat in his cell, watching, waiting, and yet his silence no longer felt empty. Now it carried the memory of those words. The first signs of doubt appeared quickly. A guard refused to enter the prisoner's corridor. "I won't go near him," he said. "His eyes follow me. I can feel it." Another soldier, once brave and loyal, started trembling during duty. "What if he knows something we don't?" he whispered to his partner. "What if his people are coming?" The commanders dismissed such fears at first. "Nonsense!" they barked. It was only a trick. Humans are weak. They break easily. But the soldiers were not convinced. They had seen his face, heard his whisper, felt the strange calm that surrounded him. This was not weakness. This was something else. Then strange reports began to arrive. One patrol ship had gone missing. An outpost had gone silent. A supply convoy had been destroyed. At first, the commanders blamed accidents, bad weather, or simple enemy luck. But the soldiers whispered a different explanation. "He warned us," one said quietly. "He said we are all dead." The rumor spread fast. The whisper became prophecy. Inside the observation chamber, the scientists argued among themselves. "Maybe it was a psychological tactic," one said. "Then why does it feel so real?" Another replied. They checked the prisoner's vitals again, his heart, his breathing, his brain activity. Everything was calm. "Too calm, no fear, no stress," one muttered. "It's unnatural," the lead scientist frowned. "It's not unnatural. It's dangerous." Meanwhile, the guards noticed something else. Sometimes late at night, the prisoner would move his lips again. Soft whispers too faint to understand. "What is he saying?" one guard asked, his voice shaking. Another shook his head. "I don't know. But every time he whispers, something goes wrong." The ship's lights flickered. Engines failed. A power surge knocked out the communications array. Each accident fed the fear. "His words are curses," one soldier swore. "No," another argued, pale and trembling. "They're predictions." And that was worse. The commanders grew worried. Discipline was breaking. Soldiers avoided guard duty. Rumors spread faster than orders. So, they held a meeting. "He is only one man," the lead commander growled. "We are an army." We cannot allow his words to weaken us. But even he could not hide the doubt in his eyes. He, too, had heard the whisper. He, too, felt its weight. What if he knows something? One officer asked softly. What if humans have planned something greater than we realize? The room fell silent. No one wanted to answer. Back in his cell, the human sat quietly. He did not rage. He did not cry. He did not beg. He simply waited, as if time itself belonged to him. When guards passed, he would sometimes look up. Just a glance. Just enough to remind them that he was still there. Still silent, still patient, and always, they remembered the whisper. "You're all dead." By the 9th day, the ship was no longer the same. Guards looked over their shoulders as they walked. Soldiers carried their weapons even in the mess hall. The air was heavy with fear and paranoia. One soldier finally broke. He shouted in the corridor, "We should kill him! Kill him before his words come true!" Others silenced him quickly, but his words spread. Some began to agree. The human was no longer just a prisoner. He was a shadow, a curse, a walking prophecy of death. And deep inside, every alien knew the truth. The doubt was winning. The doubt had already spread like fire through dry grass. But on the 10th day, the whispers of fear turned into something worse. Belief, because signs began to appear. It started small. A light in the command deck flickered and died. Nothing unusual. Machines failed all the time. But that same morning, a guard swore he had seen the human whisper again, his lips forming silent words in the darkness of his cell. By evening, the engines stalled. The ship drifted in space for 2 long hours before they roared back to life. The crew grew restless. Some soldiers muttered that the human had caused it. "He said we're all dead," one hissed. "Now the ship is breaking apart." "Coincidence," the commander barked. But even he could not fully believe his own words. The next day, a food shipment spoiled. Containers that should have lasted months were suddenly rotten. The smell filled the storage decks. Soldiers gagged, covering their faces, and then someone remembered. "Last night," a guard whispered. He was moving his lips again. He was whispering. That was all it took. The story spread fast. Every failure, every accident, every mistake, all connected to the prisoner. The scientists tried to calm the panic. "There is no proof," one argued. "Machines break. Supplies rot. This is natural." But another shook her head. "It is not natural. Look at him. He does not sleep, he does not break. And now the ship itself is failing around him. Do you truly believe that is chance?" Silence fell in the lab. None of them dared answer. On the 11th day, something worse happened. A patrol ship sent to scout nearby space went silent. No signal, no distress call. It simply vanished. When the news reached the crew, terror spread like disease. "He said it," a soldier muttered. "He promised it." "We are all dead," the commander slammed his fist on the table. "Enough of this!" It was an attack. Humans destroyed the patrol. But the soldier shook his head. Then how did he know? The question hung in the air. No one could answer. That night the guards swore they heard something. A voice, low, whispering from the human's cell. They leaned closer, trying to hear. But when the human opened his eyes, they froze. He was staring at them, calm, patient, waiting. The whispers stopped. The guards ran. From that night onward, no one wanted to guard him. Soldiers begged to be reassigned. Some even faked illness to avoid the corridor. The commanders forced replacements, but even the bravest came back pale and trembling. "He is doing something," one said. "He's calling death to us," another swore, and slowly the ship began to believe. By the 12th day, the fear had turned into chaos. Weapons malfunctioned during drills. Doors jammed shut. Communication systems failed without warning. Every time someone claimed they had seen the prisoner whispering just before it happened, it was no longer coincidence. It was cause and effect. At least that was what the crew believed. The commanders tried to keep order. They shouted, punished, even threatened. But discipline was gone, because no punishment could erase the fear in their minds. One night, a group of soldiers gathered in secret. "We must kill him," one whispered. "If we kill him, the curse ends," but another shook his head. "No, if we kill him, maybe the curse grows stronger." "Maybe his death is the final spark," the group argued until silence fell. No one dared make the choice. And so, the human lived, silent, watching, waiting. By the 13th day, the commanders themselves began to doubt. Reports piled up, ships missing, bases destroyed, fleets scattered. Humans were attacking everywhere, striking like ghosts in the dark. The commanders looked at each other with pale faces. "How is this possible?" one asked. "Perhaps," another whispered, he knew. "Perhaps he was warning us." The room went quiet. No one laughed anymore. In his cell, the human finally shifted. He looked up at the ceiling, his lips moving once more in silence. No one could hear the words, but the crew swore they felt them. And hours later, another outpost went dark. The whisper had become truth, and the truth had become prophecy. The ship was no longer just carrying a prisoner. It was carrying a curse, and every alien knew the signs were only the beginning. The 14th day began in silence, but it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of fear. Every corridor of the alien warship felt heavy. Every shadow seemed alive. Every soldier walked with tense steps, waiting for something to break. And when the alarms began to scream, the fear finally shattered. A fleet had been destroyed. The news came in sudden bursts over the failing comms. 3 warships, strong and armed, had gone dark, not defeated in battle. Not sending distress calls, simply gone. The crew stared at the reports in disbelief. "This is impossible," the commander said, but his voice shook. Another officer whispered, "It's him. He said we are all dead." That single sentence spread like wildfire. The soldiers began to panic. Some ran to the hangars, demanding escape pods. Others locked themselves in their quarters, muttering prayers to alien gods. And deep in his cell, the human finally moved. He stood up, slowly, calmly. For 2 weeks, he had been nothing but silence. But now his presence felt heavier, stronger. Guards saw it. They backed away, even though the cell door was still locked. "He is waiting," one said. "Waiting for what?" another asked. The human smiled. Just a little. Enough to make both guards flee. That night, the ship shook. Something had attacked them. Explosions rocked the outer hull. Sirens wailed. Red lights flashed. The crew scrambled, shouting, firing weapons into empty corridors, convinced death had already come. But when the scans came back, no enemy ships were detected. Nothing was out there, yet the damage was real. Fires burned in the lower decks. Oxygen levels dropped in several sections, and still, the humans stood silent, watching. The commander tried to hold control. "Listen to me," he shouted in the central hall. "These are just malfunctions, coincidences. The human is nothing." But the soldiers were no longer listening. They were whispering among themselves, "He cursed us. He is death. He will kill us all." The commander roared, slamming his weapon against the wall. But even he could not stop the truth in his own mind, because he remembered the words. He remembered the whisper. "You're all dead." The 15th day. The alien ship tried to contact its fleet again. No answer. Screens showed only static. Outposts that once glowed with activity now lay silent, dark in the void. Everywhere they looked, emptiness. It was as if the galaxy itself had turned against them, and the humans' whisper echoed louder in their minds. Then, the killing began. Not by the human. By the crew themselves. Fear drove them mad. Soldiers accused each other of bringing the curse. Fights broke out in the corridors. Weapons fired. Blood stained the walls. The commanders tried to stop it, but chaos was too strong. It was no longer a warship. It was a cage of terrified animals tearing each other apart, and in the middle of it all, the human finally spoke. Not loud. Not shouting. Just one more whisper. But this time, the guards heard it. Soon. That single word spread through the ship faster than any bullet. By the 16th day, the warship was falling apart. Engines flickered. Power failed. Weapons refused to fire. The crew begged their commanders to kill the human. End him! Maybe it ends the curse. But others screamed the opposite. No! If we kill him, we die faster. Leave him alive! The argument turned into violence. Commanders executed soldiers to maintain control. Soldiers revolted against commanders. The warship was collapsing from the inside. Meanwhile, the human waited. His silence was no longer empty. It was heavy, alive. He did not need chains. The crew had chained themselves with their fear. That night, the stars outside the viewport shifted. A fleet appeared. Not alien ships. Human ships, silent, dark, predators in the void. The crew gasped in horror as dozens of human warships surrounded them, weapons glowing like the eyes of wolves in the dark. And at that moment, every alien on board understood. The whisper had not been a curse. It had been a warning. The human turned his head, meeting the terrified eyes of the guards. For the first time, his voice rose above a whisper. Calm, cold, certain. I told you, he said. You're already dead. The warship shook as human weapons charged. And the fall truly began. The alien warship hung in space, broken and burning. Fires raged in its corridors. Systems failed one after another. The crew no longer fought the humans outside. They fought their own terror inside, and the human prisoner simply waited. The fleet of human ships surrounded them like silent hunters. Not rushing, not attacking, just waiting. The aliens watched the screens in despair. They had always believed humans were weak, desperate survivors. But the ships outside told another story. Dark, silent, patient, like predators who had finally revealed their teeth. The alien commander tried to hold what little control remained. We will fight, he roared. We will not fall to whispers. Prepare weapons. But when the crew obeyed, the systems failed. The cannons would not power on. Missiles jammed in their bays. Shields refused to rise. It was as if the ship itself had already surrendered. In the cell, the guards stood frozen, staring at the prisoner. The human looked at them with calm, steady eyes. Not angry, not triumphant, just certain, he whispered again. You hear it now, don't you? The sound of the end. The guards flinched. One dropped his weapon. The other turned and ran. The silence after his words was worse than any scream. Then the attack began. Human ships moved as one. No wasted fire. No wild strikes. Every blast landed with precision, cutting the alien warship apart piece by piece. The corridors shook. Beams collapsed. Atmosphere vented into space. The aliens fired back, but their weapons still failed. Their ship was already dead, and now the body was being carved open. Panic turned into chaos. Some soldiers tried to escape in pods. But as soon as they launched, human ships destroyed them in seconds. Others begged their commanders for surrender. But surrender required mercy, and no one believed humans had mercy left. The commander himself staggered into the control room, blood dripping from a cut across his head. He stared at the fading screens. His crew looked at him with desperate eyes. What do we do? They begged. The commander looked at the cell cameras, at the humans standing tall behind the bars. For the first time, the commander understood. It had never been about the cell. The real prisoner was not the human. It was them, trapped in fear, and the whisper had been the key. Explosions shook the ship again. The commander collapsed against the wall, his vision blurred. The last thing he heard was the whisper echoing in his mind. You're all dead. Meanwhile, the guards finally opened the human's cell. Not to free him, but because they had no strength left to keep him locked. The door slid open with a hiss. The human stepped out slowly, stretching as if waking from a long rest. His chains clattered to the floor. He looked at the guards, both pale, trembling, broken. Go, he said simply. And they ran. The human walked calmly through the burning corridors. Smoke filled the air. Sparks fell from broken wires. Dead aliens lay scattered across the floors, but he walked as if it were all expected. As if the ship was only playing out the ending he had already seen. Finally, he reached the viewport. The human fleet hovered outside, waiting for his signal. He stood tall, his eyes reflecting the light of the burning warship. He raised one hand slowly, and the fleet moved. The final volley came without mercy. Beams of light cut through the alien vessel, splitting it open like glass. The ship groaned, tore apart, and scattered into the void in 1,000 pieces. The silence that followed was total. The alien warship was gone. Only one figure remained. The human, standing on a fractured deck that floated in space, waiting to be recovered by his fleet. His whisper had ended as it began. Quiet, calm, certain. The prophecy was complete. In the darkness of space, the galaxy would remember what happened here. That one whisper could destroy an army. That silence could be more deadly than any weapon. And above all, they would remember the words that began it all. You're all dead.